think that's what we want.
That's the ideal.
All right. Are we ready?
Wait, is my hair okay?
Yeah.
No, it looks terrible.
Dang it. Welcome to the latest podcast from the Watercolors Aquarium. I messed it up already. Welcome to the latest Watercolors Aquarium Gallery podcast, brought to you from the Aquarium Rush Studios in beautiful downtown Grand Rapids, Michigan. It's starting to warm up a little bit here.
Yes, it's very wet today.
Yeah. My name's Ben.
I'm Amy.
And I'm Charles.
Well, today we're going to talk about one of the really hot trends in the reef keeping world. We're going to be all like keeping up with the times, and
We're so hip.
I know, right? We're dedicating this entire podcast to nano saltwater aquariums.
I'm so excited about this. This is going to be a really fun one, guys. There's so many cool ideas that I feel like I never get to see in person or see other people do either.
Yeah, and I think there are a lot more options out there than people think there are.
Mm-hmm.
The classic saltwater reef tank is so... I'm not going to use the word overdone because that's being critical of it.
Right.
But it's so...
I'm going to say it's overdone.
No, because I think people should keep doing it, and they're beautiful, and they're amazing, and a little slice of the reef matters. But they've kind of become a little out of reach for a lot of people. You know, the freshwater hobby does a great job of, hey, if you don't want to spend much money, you can do a pretty cool little freshwater tank. If you want to spend a pile of money, you can do an amazing freshwater tank. The saltwater hobby tends to... Saltwater's expensive.
Yeah, as you were saying it, I was thinking about, I was like, the only way to quote unquote do saltwater cheap is to do it small.
Yeah, most people, when they get some money to spend on saltwater, they immediately put it to size first. Mm-hmm. Like, even a 75-gallon tank, all of your equipment is twice as expensive and you need more of it.
Absolutely.
So what would happen if you halved your equipment expenses, or if you kept them the same but got smaller stuff?
Ooh.
Because that's what I would...
Cooler, better, funner stuff.
Exactly. That's what I would love to see people do.
Yeah. There are some amazing new products coming out in the nano size department. I was looking at the Aqua Illumination Nero 3 circulation pump.
Oh, that thing is so cool.
It's so cool. And it's teeny.
Yeah.
And it's adjustable.
And it's expensive.
It is. Well, it's not
but
horrible.
not that bad. No, it's actually pretty doable.
Yeah.
And if you have a small tank, you don't need 3 of them.
You
need one.
Yeah.
Fun fact for you guys, this weekend I had to give myself a crash course in the Nero circulation pumps because I got a text from Derek saying, I got someone coming in the store asking about it. And I was like, oh, crap.
Yeah, you still got to, pretend you know what you're talking about.
Exactly.
That's pretty much all I do the whole time during these entire podcasts.
Just anyone listening to the podcast.
Don't peel back that curtain yet.
Yeah, I was like, anyone listening to the podcast, I cannot tell you how often the solution is, let me text Ben, or you get, in this particular case, someone knew someone was coming in and texted me so that I could be ready when that person got in the store.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Even we can't know everything. Ooh, how vain did that sound?
I know, right?
We're so humble.
Anyway, back to Nano Reefs.
Yeah, how do we bite into this subject? We did prepare some interesting, unique tanks we've come up with, but do we need to give more of an overview first?
Well, let's talk about the inspiration for the talk.
Oh.
So I get to brag about my worldly travels a little bit. Just a little bit, though. So I had the privilege in, was it 2 years ago? No, 2019.
So
yeah,
yes.
2020 stopped. So yes, 2019.
If you delete a year,
no,
it was
18.
1 year ago.
Yeah, that's right, because 2020 didn't actually exist.
Right.
Right, but it was 2018. To go to Belize. And I spent a great deal of time in the water on the reefs around Belize, and it was absolutely incredible. And here's my little commercial for Belize. Go there. It's amazing. It's easy to get around. You can leave Grand Rapids at 7:30 in the morning and make it in time for the sunset booze cruise. I mean, the sunset viewing cruise off of Ambergris Key. which is where everyone should go. I mean, it's amazing. Incredibly clear, beautiful blue water on the second largest barrier reef in the world.
We've got to like pipe in some calming beach waves or something in that section for our little tourism announcement.
Yeah. So anyway, what does that have to do with Nano Reefs? So like I said, I spend a tremendous amount of time in the water, hours and hours and hours and hours with my face in a mask in the water, some scuba diving and some snorkeling. And there's a pretty healthy population of brain corals. And brain corals in the size of a fist all the way up to the size of a washing machine.
Wow.
Every one of those brain corals that I found, and we're talking on the main mass part of the reef where it's just all covered in coral, and then you run across a brain coral, to some of the fringe reef areas, to some of the patch reef areas where really almost in a grass bed, and then there's this little mound of rocks with corals growing on it. Everywhere that I found a brain coral, there were neon cleaner gobies on the brain coral. The fist-sized brain coral had these 2 neon cleaner gobies that could not have been a half of an inch long.
Aw,
They were adorable.
I love those fish.
The big washing machine-sized brain corals had like 2 or 3 family groups. Probably not family groups. I don't think they would have been related, but 2 or 3 cohesive groups of
Like-
neon cleaner gobies.
Work crews? I don't know what do you call a group of neon cleaner gobies?
A shift.
A shift.
Trainees. Yeah. Place shifts, whatever they were. But so anyway, we thought, hey, neon cleaner gobies are one of those fish that we can get tank raised on a regular basis. They're absolutely gorgeous little fish with personality, and they're active, and they're small. So we put them in our 10.5 rimless nano tank. We made a nice tight fitting cover for that tank. And we put a piece of brain coral in the tank. Actually, it's a red and green fabia, but it kind of looks brain coral-like. And the gobies agreed. They immediately took to it. They hosted it perfectly.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it was like within an hour they were paired up and living inside the hole of that coral. It was perfect. It was exactly what we wanted.
I just love how their body language is. I know what to do with this.
Yeah, there's no stress about it. Just like this is just natural. This is the way that it's supposed to be. And that's like, to me, that's when a tank is perfect, is like when the residents have that, you can just tell like it's home for them.
They look relaxed. Their fins don't look, when their fins are all stretched out or when they're all clamped. Either one of those is a bad sign.
Yeah, and they're comfortable with the full space of the tank.
Yep.
They are like, they're owning that spot.
They look perfect in there.
And my favorite thing about them is that if someone walks up to the tank, they swim up towards the person.
Yeah.
And that's like that lack of fear.
Right.
I get that it's a cleaner fish, so they don't really have it, but like that being comfortable with something big moving outside of the tank that like just makes them a good display fish.
Absolutely.
Makes me smile every time.
For sure. I think it's a combination of the fact that they're a cleaner and that they're tank raised that makes them so that innate fear of something large isn't a thing. And it's such a simple little tank.
Yeah. One coral, one type of fish. The tank is a third full of stuff, It's not packed out with a huge coral. It's not packed with a ton of rocks. Has pretty basic equipment on it just to hang on the back filter and a decent light. And that's
Is there a circulation power out on that?
Yeah, there is.
Little C-chain nano, right? Great little nano
Yeah, it's
circulation.
livestock not included, probably a $200 setup.
That's not bad at all.
No.
And it's cool. It's a fun little tank.
So that was our inspiration for this discussion.
Right? Right.
What else could we do in that tank? And why have we not seen other people do it?
Right. And how could we go extreme? And how could we do that one even cheaper? So I want to start with cheaper. Oh, the WavePoint blade is the light that's on that tank. And that seems to be enough light for that coral. It seems to be doing just fine. It's about a $60 light.
Yeah. The amazing thing about nanos, and this goes freshwater or saltwater, is you don't need as much light to have as much light.
Yeah. Shallow water.
Exactly. Like the light of that tank, I would call medium to high almost. Like if we really wanted it to be, we could put a light that's just as expensive that has brighter light, and it would probably grow light-wise whatever we wanted.
Right.
Like if we had the longer one or something.
Yeah. The Kessel A80, I think, could be okay on that tank.
Yeah, and that would be
more expensive, but
it would be like a nice high-end light. You would just need one, and it would do whatever you wanted it to.
Right.
AI Prime, same thing.
Yep. It doesn't have to be rimless. The rimless just looks cooler. So if you did just a regular 10-gallon aquarium, up the size of the back filter a little bit, put a different light on it, I think you could repeat the same look for that save you probably $50-$60.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it would still look beautiful. There's
It would
really
be just
nothing
as
wrong with a
functional.
rimmed tank.
Right.
Yeah.
Rimless is just cooler.
I don't think we've ever talked about it in the podcast. Do you want to explain why rimless tanks cost more real quick, just for people listening who may or may not know?
Sure. So if you're wondering what the cost difference is, why would it cost more? There's less stuff on it because they don't have to pay for a plastic rim. It's all about the cost of the glass. The glass has to be thicker on a rimless aquarium because that black frame that you see on most tanks, that does actually do something. That's not just trim. It holds it adds tensile strength. Is that the right? Tensile is not the right word there. It adds a certain strength to the outward
It adds structure.
Yeah, it adds structure. It adds strength to the glass, but it's so they can use really, really thin, cheap glass on a rimmed tank. They have to use a higher quality, thicker glass on a rimless tank.
And they're also usually using higher quality glass, just like full stop, like
Yeah.
low iron glass or something like that, which drives price up a little bit too.
Sorry, I just wanted to have that little digression there.
Yeah, that was a good digression. Yeah. So one of the things that makes that tank cool to me is that it's done with a very specific purpose. And I know when we started talking about this idea, I saw Amy's mind just going crazy with it. Look at all the possibilities we could do here.
Yeah, it was too many. It made it really hard for me to be like, usually when we do these, I think about a lot of things and I'm like, I don't know, that one's not that exciting, that one's not that exciting. And then I'll find like one idea where I'm like, that's the one I need to talk about. I had too many on this one. It was really hard for me to just choose the one that we planned on, so it might be hard for me to actually do that.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do we want to start with the tanks that we sort of prepared, or do we want to start with what's cheapest and what's the all out?
Let's go with the prepared thing, because I think the cheapest and all out, I think we'll
Sort out in that discussion.
they'll come
Yeah.
out in the process.
Well, the idea I ended up landing on was a pretty low tech one, so I don't mind starting.
Okay, cool.
I sort of tried to approach some of my thought with like, what are the nano tanks we do in freshwater that are really difficult or not very well replicated in saltwater often? And I really love, for people who want like an easy tank with a ton of activity, the freshwater shrimp tank. Mm-hmm. And to me, the saltwater equivalent to that's doable in a 10.5 or even smaller, just like I would probably recommend a 10-gallon shrimp tank, but you can go smaller, is amphipod breeding.
Amphipod breeding.
Amphipods are a
Interesting.
blast to watch. They're big enough that you can see them. They're very, very hardy. And if you've got a pretty complex tank, which in saltwater is easy, with a ton of macroalgae, chaeto, that kind of thing, they will reproduce, and you'll be able to watch babies pop up, and along with them, all sorts of other little creepy crawlies too.
That's one of the really fun things about having a tank with no fish in it. Fish are amazing pickers and predators. I mean, they eat all the little creepy crawlies.
Oh, and you could even, and it might work, start off with just live rock and live sand, feed it, and see what happens.
I think that would be cool.
I tried that before too, and that's when I started breeding amphipods. I would also move what other like, I'd dig around in the store for whatever other like rocks with a lot of stuff on them, like bubble algae and aptasia and all the things that we consider to be pests, which are tiny, hardy organisms that will just grow. That's what pests are. They're things that can't be killed.
Right.
So chuck all that stuff in a tank. It's going to still look really cool. It's going to be complex. It's going to have dozens of species of life in there. Feed it some reefroids, do a water change when you feel like it, and you'll have a very, very active tiny reef.
I wonder how small of a thing we could get to move water. Because that would be your size restriction right there. You'd just whatever you could do to move the water. And you could, if you put a piece of live rock the size of a quarter in something that was like a half a cup, if you could move the water.
You could use an air stone for that.
That's true. That would move plenty of water.
Yeah. I did a half-gallon jar with a sea chain bee mouse, which is their little tiny movement pump. And I think if you scaled that up to a 10, it would be even more rewarding. But even that little jar was a blast. And that's what I love about saltwater. That's the one thing that draws me to saltwater that freshwater doesn't have. And it's the biodiversity. Our freshwater tanks are too pristine. We have all that gunk in saltwater that lets us keep all sorts of weird tiny things.
Yeah, I'm going to rant on that a little bit. And that's why I get really annoyed when people are so like religious and trying to get rid of snails and algae and stuff. I'm like, dude, that's there for a reason. Like,
right.
You know what I mean? Like having a little bit, like when it overruns the tank, yeah, then it's a problem. But if you have just like, I don't know, a dime-sized patch of hair algae in your tank, who cares? You know what I mean?
Right. It's a sign of diversity and a sign of a healthy aquarium.
And if you do it well enough, you can have dime-sized patches of all sorts of things and no one thing will take over.
Yeah.
But you can't do that if your main goal is like coral propagation.
True.
But you don't need to grow corals to have all sorts of funky stuff. And you can grow plenty of corals that will tolerate Aptasia stings and stuff like that too.
You know, when you brought up Aptasia, my brain immediately went to the idea of, like every temperate aquarium, like tide pool at any like zoo or public aquarium, you can replicate that look on a smaller scale with Aptasia.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Like
a nano anemone tank was almost the answer I went with.
That would be fun. As long as it's right. Oh, with Aptasia anemones.
Yeah.
Right. It's a.
I want to rebrand Aptasias. They're not Aptasias anymore. They're nano anemones. And now they cost $50.
Wow.
Okay, fine, $5.
But now I'm actually thinking this out. So I'm picturing like a 8 to 10 gallon tank, and you have like a rock structure that's like hiding a corner, and in the corner you could have, I don't know exactly how the device would be, but the idea would to have a surge of water up over the lip of the rock.
Ooh, that would be cool.
Splashing into Aptasia on the other side. That could be a plunger type system, or even just if you were, I'm not quite sure if it would work, but if you had a really strong like surge pump on the other side.
Or maybe it would be an application for a Nero 3.
There we go.
Waved up and waved down. Or there are a number of controllable DC pumps now that you can just turn on and turn off. And because it's DC, it's not as hard on the pump.
See, that was just an off-the-cuff riff, by the way.
Yeah.
And that's why these discussions are so valuable.
Oh, yeah.
And you want to know how you kill Aptasias? Most of our people are freshwater people, so they probably don't even know what we're talking about. These are these are anemones that we single out in reef tanks to literally poison to death. And that's how you kill them, right? So you could do this tank, and if you screw something up, your Aptasias will be fine. Your little anemones will be fine.
They're really hard to kill.
And you'd have so much beautiful motion in it, too.
That's true.
You know how cool that would look if you had like that surge tank idea, and you just threw in some reefroids right before it did like a surge over, and I was like, they're grabbing at it.
Yeah, you can watch them grab food and take it in and feed. It's really fun.
Feed and multiply.
Exactly.
Like crazy.
Exactly.
And now they're $5 each.
I regret nothing.
No. Yeah, I had to talk about Aptasia because I think that it would be so easy.
You could even do Asterina stars in there.
Yeah, I know.
Or Margiano.
Mojano are cool too. You could do all of it. Like literally all of the ideas we just mentioned, you could probably do in one tank. Except for you're probably going to see less like bugs and stuff if you have a ton of anemones, just because they'll probably eat some of them.
True.
But that's okay.
That's okay. They won't be able to actively hunt them. So
Right.
It'll be all right.
Cool. Well, those are my low-tech ideas. Do you guys have other low-tech ideas?
Not as cool as yours.
That's about as bargain basement as you can get. We could probably get a little more sophisticated.
Yeah, I have two low-tech ideas that are. One of them is basically just a slightly ramped up version of what you have, but a sexy shrimp tank.
Awesome.
Basically, like the light we have downstairs would be great for like. I would do maxi mini carpet anemones.
Yeah, that would be a good combination with sexy shrimp.
Yeah. Just because I like the colors. I just love carpet anemones. And if you're going to, they don't host clownfish in case you're wondering, but they only get like 6 inches across and it's a carpet anemone. What's not to like? So I just think that's cool. And then you could have an entire colony of them. Like a 10 gallon can easily handle like 8 to 12, 15 if you're really good with your water changes. And I think that's all that tank needs to be. Like, I know that's not a very grandiose description, but you know how much activity you would have in that tank?
And the other thing is, it would look like no reef tank that anybody's seen. Like, this is an idea we've talked about. I've never seen anybody do anything like that.
Right.
And so you would have your own, like, unique little piece of reef that you invented.
That sounds pretty sweet.
Yeah, and carpet anemones, they're like a pet in their own right. Like you could feed them little krill. It would be so fun.
Ugh.
But the sexy shrimp could eat and buy them?
They actually naturally host
That's
two
where the host is?
maxi
Okay.
mini carpets. I looked extensively into that because that blows my mind. Because of the carpet anemones, the maxis are actually the most predatory.
For their size.
For their size, yeah, but that's like saying a great white is like more predatory than like, you know what I mean? But like for its sting and what it's capable of taking out for its size.
Are you talking about like ratio of prey size to organism size?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're fully capable of taking in fish much larger than themselves.
Okay, I see what you mean. I get it. Because we had a carpet anemone for a while that was
Carpet, just a quick
full size.
I know.
It was I don't remember. I can't remember the specific.
I know the story as a blue hippo tank.
Yeah, it was a 14-inch blue hippo tank, but the anemone was 24 inches across.
Wow.
Yeah, I tell people that if you want a carpet anemone, you're going to have a carpet anemone tank, and if you're lucky, clownfishes too.
Yeah.
The nice thing about that setup, it too, which is like almost freaky, is that you wouldn't have to feed the shrimp. They will live off of the slime on the anemones.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. So you might need to throw in some food there for the anemones, but it's almost a system where all you have to do is water changes.
If you had decent light, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's wild.
That's
It feels
pretty sweet.
wrong. Like you
I
feel
know,
like
right?
you
It's
need
like
to fiddle with a tank.
I know, it's the exact opposite. Like, I'm not feeding my shrimp, but I'm feeding the anemones.
Yeah. We wouldn't need very many water changes because there wouldn't be any fish in the system to produce much waste.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much you would be replenishing micronutrients and trace elements that the anemones and the shrimp would need, and that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think
That'd be
this is a
amazing.
great moment to talk about how much of a bioload fish are.
Yeah.
We get asked all the time about our like 2 and 3 gallon coral bowls, and people are like, "How is that possible?" And my answer is always because we don't have fish in them.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
Yeah. And especially in a saltwater tank where your water costs you money and trips to the fish store and like
Not that we want to discourage the trips to the fish
no,
store.
please come and see us. And honestly, water's not expensive, but like it's still good to know how far your water's gonna go.
Yeah. Yeah.
10 gallons of water in a maxi mini carpet anemone tank with sexy shrimp is going to go a lot farther than the same tank with a clownfish in it.
Yeah, and that Maxi Mini tank, if you're doing a gallon every 2 weeks,
I don't see why that
would
work.
be as much as you possibly need, maybe even less.
Yeah, a gallon every 2 weeks, but if you forget, whatever, hit it next week.
Put a pair of clownfish in that tank, and now you're doing 20 or 30% every week.
Guaranteed.
And don't screw that up.
Don't screw that up. I mean,
That's a
unless
great
you don't
one.
actually like the clownfish.
Aw.
Oh,
I'm just kidding.
no, we love all of our fish. All right, what other low-tech ideas do we have?
Well,
That was a
back
really
it
great
off
one.
One more step.
Yeah.
Right? Pull the light off it. Do bigger water changes and do non-photosynthetic corals.
That would be really cool
Zero
too.
light. I don't want to go past the cool reef bowl that you have on your desk. That's just a stir plate, one of those chemistry stir plates on a globe-style bowl, and a single sun coral. That's the whole tank.
Yes.
I mean, do we call that a tank at this point? That's it.
It's just a specimen jar, basically. Like it.
But it's alive.
Yeah, exactly. It may as well be one of those like jars of formaldehyde or whatever with something in it.
Is that a gallon or 2 gallons?
I think it's 1.5.
1.5.
Yeah.
So care on that thing, feed it like crazy once a week, and then do 100% water change.
Yeah, for this, I'm right now, just because it's a non-photosynthetic and I'm worried about it being exposed to air, I'm doing more like 50% 2 or 3 times a week. But like when a tank's that small, you can just adjust things on the fly and it doesn't really affect you that much.
Right.
Like if you could do it with hammer coral and 100% water changes, and I think that would work just fine.
Yeah, true.
But we're experimenting with some non-photosynthetic stuff, so I'm shaking it up a little bit. But yeah, choose your favorite, toss it in there, see what you can do. It stays stable. It needs some rock and some biological media to stay stable. But if you're doing your water changes frequently enough, it theoretically doesn't need to be.
Move some water around some rock, and that's it.
Yeah, that's
all you
awesome.
need to sustain life. Not all
Yeah.
of it, but at least some of it.
But if you went up to 10 and you had more and you had filtration and stuff like that, yeah, you wouldn't need light.
Yep.
You just have a ton of coral. Nutrients aren't going to build up as long as those corals are sucking up food that much.
True.
That would be pretty fun.
That'd be a sweet tank. Mm-hmm. Yep. So what about bringing it up a notch? I mean, you got all these ideas, so just keep throwing them out there.
Well, I was thinking of like you could do specimen, like it's either tiny stuff or a specimen, I think, for if it's 10 gallons.
Yeah, I think that's accurate.
Like, so small anglerfish, that would be an awesome one. They don't move around a lot. One of those Kessel 880s and mushroom coral and other soft corals, or like a devil's hand or something that he could just sit on all the time or something like that.
One rock that's just completely covered in a single color of mushroom coral. Mm-hmm. That's such a cool look.
Yeah. And especially if you're not going like super blue with it, which I think like the intense blues, they work, but they're a little overrated sometimes. And you get that nice like blue purple color of mushroom.
Yeah.
That would be gorgeous. They just get washed out under the blue light.
Such a little amount of light for a mushroom coral.
Oh yeah. Like you could like maybe you could even make some sort of like couple of LEDs spotlight.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Would you say that mushroom corals need more or less or comparable light to like a spaghetti leather?
Less.
Less?
I would put like Kenyan trees and most discosoma mushrooms at like, you could almost, I know people that kept those things alive, not thrive, but alive, under a single regular fluorescent tube. Just one, like a 10-gallon tank.
Yeah.
Right? With a mushroom and a Kenyan tree coral, and that was all the light they needed.
All right. Well, then you just answered the question to finish the last piece of this one that I was thinking about maybe talking about tonight. I love the idea of trying to make a tank that looks like it's about 80 feet down.
Oh, sure.
and I want it to be a purple firefish tank. Because that's the depth you would find them in.
Would you be okay with a purple firefish in 10 gallons?
Yeah. They don't really use a lot of vertical or horizontal space. They're more of a hover in a specific spot above the water, and then they'll have a little bolt hole. So if you built like a low-lying structure of rockwork so that it could burrow underneath like a flat of it, I think I would be more than happy.
I can see that. They get that hovering effect.
But then you want that low-lying rockwork. I'm thinking of it like framed with mushroom and canyon trees in the back.
Mm-hmm.
That would be beautiful.
Just like a dim skew a little towards blue, just because blue can get down deeper.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, blue has its functions, and to me, it makes it look deep water.
yeah.
And I kind of like shallow water reefs too.
I feel like if you did this is a shout out to something Amy said. If you're doing a really shallow reef, you might consider doing like a twin star, because that definitely gives out shallow water light.
Yeah,
That's what I got
true.
for the reef tank I just set up.
Did you?
I cheaped out. It's either I get that now, which is like $120, or I spend $500 on light when I just set up a new tank. So
I'm curious to see what that does.
it looks great.
I bet it does.
Yeah.
It's
So-
a crisp enough white.
Yeah, and it still has it's still full spectrum, and everything we've put it under looks better than it does under any other light. So I'm really curious to see, like all of our Espe rasboras are oranger under,
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see how it'll interact with a reef. I've seen people do reefs with it before, but not anybody I've known.
Okay. I expect a full report.
Yeah. We'll see. I got to actually get some stuff in there first.
Right. Yeah.
But if it doesn't work, it's the upgrade that I need for my other tank. So
Okay.
it kind
There
of
you
evens
go.
out.
Right.
Anyway,
Anyway,
we really like twin stars.
we do. I love the idea of trying it on saltwater. I wanna see.
Yeah, and I'm thinking if I like it, I could just add on like a blue true lumen strip or something, and it might just have that exact right
That's
combination.
probably going to be everything you need.
Yeah.
Honestly, if you wanted to do like a seagrass tank, that would be my instinctive response for the light you'd throw on.
If you're going to do seagrass, though, I bet you would need to go with the S-class.
I'm nodding my head
Yeah.
for that. I just
Yeah.
realized that no, that doesn't translate. But yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought about doing that so I could do seagrass, but it was too big of a leap to double the price.
Yeah, the thing with seagrass is you don't see it deeper than like 20 feet.
yeah.
And I think it's most prevalent at 6 or less, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's why twin star is my instinctive response, because
Yeah.
that light is trying to replicate light that's getting in water in less than 10 feet of water.
Yeah.
So I'm like,
Yeah.
if you're just going to blast a twin star at it, I think it would work.
It makes me want to try it.
I really want to try it.
Yeah.
I think we've all sort of been thinking about what the applications for that light could be.
All right, back to nano. Back to the 10-gallon saltwater aquarium. So we kind of touched on some of the lights, and we touched on some of the circulation pumps. Really, the AI Prime and the Kessel A80, those are the two, let's go all out. Mm-hmm. That little Waypoint does it. We just got the new Lifeguard full spectrum light in. I wonder if that's going to be like a little miniature twin star.
I don't know. I wonder if it'll be a little bit more like the mid-range currents.
That's probably true. It looks like it's got a little more going on than the currents.
It does. It looks almost like it looks more like the current Orbit Marine or something like that has those supplementary LEDs on
It's
it.
only 10 inches long, which is
Adorable.
makes it work for a nano. It's applicable. Although I guess there's twin stars that are that small too, aren't there?
There's the 400 millimeter.
Yeah.
And the Fluval are another good mid-range. They're controllable, so you
Yeah,
can
that's
get
true.
some of the fun aspects of the more expensive lights, and you can adjust. Like the ability to adjust your lighting as you go is actually a pretty underrated benefit to those lights. Everybody looks at like, oh, they're so cool, the technology is awesome, but how often do you know exactly what stuff you're going to want to put in a tank when you set it up?
It's true. And when we're talking about a nano tank and a shallow tank, you may want to tone the intensity down for a little while.
Right. If you don't have many
4
coral
inches
in
of
there,
water.
yeah. Then blasting a twin star at it, or even some of the wave point blade. We had, when we changed out the coral in that tank, we had a pretty big algae bloom because the tank needed some time to catch up. If it was controllable, I would have turned it down over that time period.
That's true.
So we could still have light on there.
I like it.
Yeah. I never know what else to call it because there's like the Fluval Nano, but in my head, even though it's square, I want to call it the hockey puck. Those
I can see that.
Those are one of my favorites of the nano lights. They just look slick.
Right.
And they do basically what I would want a tank that I would put that on to do.
So that's light. Circulation. You got to move water. No matter what, you got to move water. A little mini back filter with the right tank might be all the movement you need.
Yeah, aqua clears for the simplicity.
Yeah, they're just too easy.
Like, you don't need cartridges. You don't need any other stuff. You just need a box with a sponge in it.
And maybe room for Purigen if you really need it.
Right. Somewhere to chuck chemical filtration when it comes up.
Yeah. And the AquaClears would do that perfectly. The C-Chain makes that beautiful little bitty nano circulation pump.
Yeah, I love that thing.
Doesn't take up any room.
And it still behaves like a larger circulation pump.
Yep.
You know, it's still a CJ pump. It's still high quality. We've never had one of those break down on us.
Fun fact. Remember when I talked about when I had to jury rig my own flow through respirometers in college?
Oh, yeah.
CJ pumps were what we were using on them. Because they were the only ones small enough to fit what we were trying to do.
They did a great job with engineering those little pumps. It's worth. There are some other pumps that have a similar look, supposed to do a similar thing. Maybe some of that have been out a little longer. I'm not naming any names, but the quality jump you get going into a CJ is worth it.
And for an extra $10.
Yeah.
Definitely worth it.
Yep, for sure. That little Nero 3 by Aqua Illumination. If you want to go all in with a nano circulation pump.
Are we done with low tech?
I'm just picturing like a guy pushing all his chips to the middle of the table.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. Well,
No, I mean, I'm ready. I just don't want to leave anything behind because I'm ready to have that conversation.
I didn't have any low tech ones. Really, I was just going to listen to see what you guys came up with there. But I talked about the non-photo
Cool.
tank.
Yeah.
No, I'm ready to move on.
Yeah, I figured we'd just throw in some of the stuff to let's kick it up a notch.
Because if you're gonna do it, you may as well just buy into the AI ecosystem.
The
Nero
3 and the
AI Prime. You can
Yeah.
hook them up to go together. You can have the flow slow down or speed up in the evening. You can do all sorts of things that you don't need at all, but are very cool.
Let's face it, an aquarium, you do it because it's all very cool.
Yeah, you don't need any of it, so you may as well do it the way that's
Right.
fun.
Over the weekend, I legitimately got asked, "What's the most memorable thing you've ever seen happen in the store?" And I told them I was happy I was there to witness the time someone asked, "Do you really need a coral light to ramp up and ramp down like sunlight?" And you're like, "I mean, we're keeping reef tanks at home. Do we really need any of it?" And I just remember thinking, never thought of it that way, but yeah.
It's all about what is it about a reef tank, and we talked about this a little bit last week. It's what is it about a tank that you love, and for some people it's the tech. And if you love the tech, and you're going with a nano, yes, there are some bigger, techier lights out there, but it doesn't take long for you to get too big for a 10-gallon tank. Too much light for a 10-gallon tank. And
Yeah.
I think the Prime and the Nero 3.
It'd be an awesome combination.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, my husband is actually pretty excited about this new tank because of all the funky stuff he can do.
Speaking of someone who loves the tech.
Exactly. Like that's the way to get like him as excited about it as I am. And to try and explain to him why technologically the Twin Star is just as cool to me as the AI is definitely a different conversation.
Right.
But I'm like, no, but this one is perfect already. I don't even have to, but yeah, it's definitely part of it. And it's allowed to be like,
Heck yeah.
it's crazy stuff. Keeping things alive.
That's why I'm not critical of the fact that you guys like Aptasias.
You didn't even say anything about it.
I kept my mouth shut.
I was very proud of you.
And Ben's the one who will walk through the store and be like, there's 3 Aptasias on that rock over there. Who's going to take care of them? And it's Eva. She's over to the side here.
Member of our studio audience.
She's a proficient Aptasia assassin.
Excellent.
She enjoys it a little too much.
I would like her to wipe them out. All of them.
All right, what else are we putting on this? Do you have an inspiration for your high-tech reef of what we're going to keep and what we're going to put in it?
No,
No?
not really.
I have an inspiration. I'll get to that later. I want to relate to a conversation you and I were talking about earlier. If you go really high-tech with a nano tank, I wonder what kind of experimentation you could do with trying to spawn corals.
Oh, yeah. We were just talking about, we had
Yeah.
somebody who had torch coral spawn in his tank and pop up all over the place.
So the challenge you will have with a nano tank is corals need to be mature to spawn.
Yeah.
And really what that translates to, of course, using the word coral is a huge term, right? But mature equals big.
Yeah.
So one of the books that I reference is Breeding Techniques for Reef Building Corals by Dirk Peterson. It's basically his PhD doctoral thesis on breeding corals, and he talks a lot in there about how big some of his Euophilia colonies had to be before they started reproducing sexually.
How big?
A foot.
So 10 gallon is 18 inches. No.
That was literally the math I was doing in my head real quick there.
So I have it's vaguely off topic. What physically makes a coral sexually mature? Do we know that?
I think maybe we need to read the book again because I'm sure it talks about it in there, but
I've never read the book. It's like it's a mystery to me.
Yeah.
So-
It's,
Like what is in a coral's pants?
Yeah.
now you're just talking dirty.
Like, I'm trying to picture if you had, like, I know this is a little bit larger than what we outlined here, but I'm just going on a riff here, and
Sure.
I'm going with it. If you had, like, a 12 by 12 by 12 cube, and you had it super control ability of, like, lunar, solar, and all that stuff, is it possible, like, because, and I think about this is the type of thing I think about a lot because there's so little money on the scientific side for ornamental stuff like this, but hobbyists do this for fun, and I think there's an untapped resource pool of you could do something that's never been done before if you're willing to just kind of stick with it for a while.
But remember that if and I'm just gonna pick at it a little bit, right? If it's a 12 by 12 by 12 cube, you're not putting a 1 foot diameter coral in there.
Yeah.
You got to go bigger.
Okay, let's say 15 by 15 by 15.
Whatever the minimum size is for reproduction, I think is what you're trying to say.
Whatever the minimum size is to pull it off. Then.
Yeah.
Whatever that may be.
Yeah.
And I think that would be very coral dependent on whatever you're trying to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And this is a call out to, it's very easy to find the scientific literature for a lot of this stuff. And if it doesn't exist, that means whatever you do is untapped territory.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's so much more of it than people think. Like so much more things to discover that aren't known. Sorry, was I fiddling with the thing?
Can you hear that?
I can hear it a little bit.
Oh, sorry.
But
Untapped, yes.
yeah, there are so many things that aren't known than people think.
Yeah, very true.
Or
And-
even let's just imagine you have a bird nest that's like 10 inches across and you just have some gobies peeking in and out of it. That would be fun, even without doing anything crazy.
It's true. Like a 10-gallon packed with one coral, and a bird's nest would be a great one.
See, that's a look that I think needs to be explored more. Is not this one of these and one of these and one of these and one of these when it comes to coral. The fruit stand looked, but yeah, like our the inspiration for the talk, that one coral, and before the brain coral was in there, when we had that big, huge, giant spaghetti leather that was basically filled the tank with some mushroom corals, and that was the whole look.
It was beautiful.
It was great.
Yeah, I really like that tank.
Yep.
I'm just trying to inspire people to try something maybe a little different than they thought they could pull off.
Yeah.
Figure out what you want to know and chase that.
Yeah.
The cost of dosing a 10-gallon nano tank to provide enough calcium, magnesium, proper pH alkalinity to keep bird's nest growing and thriving, it's not going to cost you much.
I don't think
It's only 10 gallons.
I've ever seen a calcium reactor on a tank less than 100 gallons.
I've seen one on a 90 gallon.
Okay. That might be the exception that proves the rule.
I had one on a 40 gallon.
Is this the one that you set fire to the house with?
Yeah, as a matter of fact. Yeah.
Like if you're talking about planted aquariums in freshwater, there is a very like almost linear progression. And in some ways it appears a lot more linear than it actually is. But in the minds of hobbyists, it's very clearly low light, high tech, and CO2. You know?
Right.
And there's not that division in saltwater of like, you know what? I'm ready to I've got this 20-gallon tank. I'm just going to keep throwing more technology at it until it can grow whatever I want it to. Or at least not that I've seen. Like putting on this 10-gallon tank a calcium reactor, a phosphate reactor, controllable lights and pumps. Just keep upgrading it and the tank will get better. It just won't get bigger.
Yeah, true. So I wonder why that is. Like, why isn't that progression? People don't upgrade.
I think it's because the paradigm in saltwater is go big or go home.
It's true.
And so when people can upgrade, they don't upgrade equipment, they upgrade their tank.
That's true.
Because now they can finally keep the fish they actually want.
Right.
Quote unquote.
Yeah. But it's true, though, and that's very relevant to this discussion. People come in, and if they've never kept a saltwater tank before, they say, I really want to keep a saltwater tank, but I know bigger tanks are easier, so I'm going to wait until I can afford something at least a 75.
I think that's a mentality and a bandwagon that I've been on. And there is truth in, if you want a mixed reef, that's your goal, then bigger is better. But that statement just made so many things about how you and I talk about reefs make differently, because I hate mixed reefs. I shouldn't say hate. I'm just, they all look the same to me at this point. And so I'm much more intrigued by these like specimen tank ideas because that is so unique to me. And so like, yeah, the idea that I just don't value a larger tank as much as you do, it's probably tied to the fact that I don't desire to have a mixed reef at home. Yeah, that makes sense. People want dory in their tank, right? People have this list of fish they want. You want more fish? You need a bigger tank. You want to keep a tang? You can't keep a tang or an angel.
It's a bummer to me because this may not go over well with this crowd. Fish are the most boring part of reef tanks to me.
Yeah, fish are the reason I would do a saltwater tank.
To me, they're like, well, if you're going to do a saltwater tank, you're going to have fish in there. But like all the other animals you get to keep are so much more interesting to me. There are plenty of fish in freshwater I think are cool. There are plenty of saltwater fish that I think are amazing and I think are cool, but I still think they're the most boring part.
I couldn't argue you out of that at all. And I totally understand where you're coming from with that. I don't agree, but only from a taste standpoint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
From and wow, the cleaner shrimp are absolutely incredible. Corals are amazing.
If it's never come off on the podcast, I'm very vertebrate oriented, and I have a hard time understanding people who think in freshwater plants first, fish second. I can understand people who think coral first and fish second in saltwater, because at least like it's still an animal and I can kind of comprehend that a little bit.
Yeah.
So I
You just discriminate based on the presence of a spine.
more or less, yeah. It's just what I'm most comfortable with.
Right. All right. So in that 10-gallon tank, what fish can we keep? I mean, the anglerfish wasn't even one I thought of. Is there one that's going to only get like 4 inches?
Yeah, I think the warty stays very small, like 4 inches. I think there are 2 or 3 species in the 4 to 6 range.
When we got lumpy, that's what we were hoping to get, and then of course we get the biggest species. But.
Right. Lumpy's going to get the size of a basketball.
Which
That'll
will
be
be
awesome.
very cool to see. But yes, there are some that stay pretty small.
Right.
I mean, the sargassum stays smaller, and we could talk about that too. That would be a great 10
Was
gallon.
that one of your...
It's something I thought about, but it wasn't on my list. But I'm just talking about like a single warty, or now I cannot think of the other name of the small one.
Does that make me tell my sargassum story?
Yes, you can tell your sargassum story.
So right after I graduated from college, I lived down in the Florida Keys for a summer. And part of the summer was on a boat, and part of the summer was I was hanging out at a friend's house who had a dock in one of the bays. And where we lived, it was right at the curve where the currents would come through. So basically, when you think of all that stuff that washes up, we lived at the curve, so that we were like where it all caught. So all kinds of like, there were times when we would get up in the morning and it was just like, oh, it stunk. You could barely, like, you wouldn't even want to think of going in that water because of all the stuff that floated in. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of what would float in was sargassum weed. For those of you that don't know, sargassum weed is a floating seaweed. Its main habitat is the center of the tropical Atlantic Ocean. That's where the quote-unquote Sargasso Sea is. That's in the center of the doldrums where there's very little current. It's very open ocean. It's thousands of feet deep. So there are these entire ecosystems that live on sargassum weed, and their whole ecosystem is up, not down. There is no bottom. If for those creatures, and there are some that can't swim, that only crawl, that live on that sargassum weed, if they fall or if they slip, it's 2,000 feet to the bottom. Or it's about 8 inches below when there's a predator waiting to take them out.
I'm picturing like a Disney villain, like, ah.
And actually, sargassum triggerfish, that's their main habitat, is eating the crabs that fall off of the sargassum weed out in the middle of the Sargasso Sea. So anyway, this stuff would come floating up. And my job when I lived in the Keys was I was a pool boy. So I had those pool skimmers. And so I started like, hey, when these basketball, softball sized clumps of sargassum weed would come floating up, I'd catch them with the pool skimmer net, put them on the dock, and see what I could find. There's this angler fish called the sargassum fish, or the sargassum angler, and it looks like sargassum weed. And I caught hundreds of them. Some of them were a centimeter or 2 in length, with the biggest one being like 2 or 3 inches. But I could just about any day I wanted to, I could go out there and catch sargassum weed, or sargassum triggers, or sargassum fish. I knew I'd get there eventually. So there we go. I have a particular affinity for those crazy little creatures.
And they are a frogfish.
They're amazing. They crawl.
They're
don't swim.
so ugly cute. And you can do them in a 10 gallon, even with just like if you just had a 10 gallon full of caulerpa, mm-hmm. and them just crawling, well, probably one crawling around.
Yeah, only one.
Yeah, because they will eat each other.
Yes, I had 5 of them in a 15-gallon aquarium. And overnight, I wish I would have seen it, because It could have been like, those Dutch dolls with them all inside of each other. Because
Nesting dolls.
The nesting dolls, yes. They were all a little bit different in size. So I wonder, did the big one eat all the little ones? Or did the smallest one get eaten by the next size up, and that got eaten by the next size up? And that, like how did that...
There's always a bigger fish.
Exactly. How'd that progression go? But yes, only one sargassum fish, only one anglerfish, and really only one fish if it's an anglerfish. They have a remarkable ability to eat something big.
Yeah, and realistically, in a 10-gallon, you're looking at 3 at the most anyway.
Yeah, even if you go with the smallest fish.
Yeah. So may as well just choose one cool one that you want or, whatever. So other fish for 10 gallons. Tail spot blenny is a good one. A couple of tiny blennies.
Yep. The possum wrasse.
Ooh, yeah.
That could go in a 10-gallon tank.
I feel like a 10-gallon tank is the best way to do that fish just because they're so shy.
Yeah, they're very shy.
But I bet they'd kind of come around to you a lot quicker if they didn't have 100 pounds of rock to live in.
I think that's true.
It's not a fish, but a pair of coral banded shrimp would be fun.
That would be very cool.
Fine. You want to hear my decked out tank?
Yeah, let's hear it.
This is an insane idea. You know
Yeah.
A Maxima clam.
Yeah.
I don't think it would be easy, but here's the thing. I once read an article of Diamondbacks living inside a Maxima clam. And I'm like, you want to do a specimen tank? I'm picturing like one of the small species of dottyback and a full-size Maxima clam in like a 10-gallon. Like you would have to be dosing that daily.
Yeah.
Hey, this is your tricked out one. Put the calcium reactor on it and give yourself a little room to breathe.
That's why I was like, this is the decked out one where like you put on everything you can put on that and you just blast it with light.
I think you'd want to do it with a dosing pump.
Probably.
Oh,
Actually,
yeah.
you probably want a dosing pump and a calcium reactor because you need to keep your magnesium and iodine levels up, and that clam would use them so quickly.
It's worth it.
I said decked out and I meant it.
Heck yeah. That's,
Yeah.
This is the, okay, let's figure out how to do it. So an AI prime and a Nero, 3,
Nodding my head.
a miniature calcium reactor, and a dosing pump.
Check.
Stability. So water quality that's where I'm getting hung up because it's still, it does not have the waste production that a fish would have, but it's still a large animal.
Yeah.
I mean, 50% weekly water changes. You think you could do it?
I almost wonder if you would have to have something. You would have to make sure that the water that you're changing would have to already have all of the trace elements in it.
It might be a good application for some of those more, like some of those salts with additives in them.
You might need to with this, yeah.
And more
Okay.
manageable in a
So
smaller
let's-
tank too.
Go a little bit bigger than we'd said.
Okay.
Because now I'm fully framing in my head how insane this idea is. So that Red Sea Reefer Nano, that's a 20-gallon tank
Yeah. Oh, with a sump.
with a sump,
And a
I'm all
skimmer.
with a skimmer, and there's an auto top-off. You just said,
Yeah.
if you figure out the chemistry you need to put in that auto top-off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, at that point, just have an automatic dosing pump and dose them separately and have the auto top off.
Right. I don't think you would need the calcium reactor. I think that the dosing pump, you could do enough calcium.
Especially if you don't have
Keep
coral
cheating
in
on
there.
this episode, but
We all cheat.
It's
Joe.
notable, and maybe it's something people need to understand, that every time we take this discussion a little farther, we raise the number of gallons.
That's true.
10 gallons is doable,
Yeah.
but if you do 20, or if you do 30,
you know, if you want to do a decked out nano, though, I think that Red Sea Reefer Nano is like your first step there. Because that gives you so much, like, I know lateral isn't the word that is really applicable, but that gives you so much lateral, like,
Yeah.
shifting ability to.
makes you much more flexible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of room inside that stand for accessories.
Yeah.
Yep.
And if you've got, if money isn't the problem, if space is the problem,
Yeah.
then you can do a stunning nano tank. There's a reason that the planted aquarium hobby, and that's not the way to say it. There's a reason that the aquascaping hobby lives in Southeast Asia. It's people who have no room and plenty of people who have a decent amount of money.
Right. Yeah,
and
that's true.
They're doing freshwater stuff, but there's plenty to be done in saltwater.
I like it. That would trick it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was my like insane, how would you do a clam in a nano tank idea?
Yeah. The 20 gallon with the sump, I can see it. Any smaller than that?
The skimmer almost makes the difference to me.
It does.
Just because it gives you more flexibility with your not needing to do giant water changes every week.
So you're not getting the big fluctuations in water chemistry that go along with water
I
temperature.
like this 20-gallon idea better, and I did not think of this before we started talking here, only because then you get a little bit more open water.
Yeah.
And I love the idea of the dotty back being above the water, and then when it gets startled by something diving into the clam.
Yeah.
That would be really cool.
Yeah.
And in the 20, you could have a pair.
That is also true.
Yes. Yes.
And pairs are fun.
All right, Amy, what are some of the crazy ideas?
All right, here. Well, honestly, I'd really like to keep revisiting the aquascaping hobby because, like, let's be real, freshwater has it for nanos.
No question.
No question.
No question.
And, like, this isn't necessarily a concrete idea, but it's definitely an avenue I'd love to see more people go down. And learn from what they have learned. In freshwater aquascapes, you easy plants that are very small.
True.
This is why I keep going back to the green star polyp idea.
Yes. And so I think to do this, have the same effect in saltwater, you need to be very careful about what you choose. Don't choose anything that's bigger than an inch or going to get bigger than an inch or appears like that. And trim mercilessly. People don't trim their saltwater tanks enough to maintain an aquascape because they feel bad and they want to get as much money as they can out of it.
Right.
But that your display suffers for that.
I agree.
So pulsing xenia, green star polyp, hammer corals if you trim them small, any of those corals that are just hardy, they're going to keep growing. You don't need to keep fiddling with your water to get them to grow. They can just fill out the aquascape that you have in your mind.
I wonder what would happen if someone took like a bird's nest and like applied like a bonsai-esque mentality with it. Because that's a SPS that grows pretty well.
Yeah, but it has very small spikes that you could use to generate a sense of scale if you trimmed it carefully and intelligently.
Those little blastos.
Yeah, that would be
cool.
awesome.
That look.
Making a lot of sense right now.
Yeah, it's like either stuff that has really small polyps or that the entire structure of the coral stays small, or it can be consistently trained to stay small or trimmed to stay small.
Yeah. I think that's why that spaghetti leather worked so well in that nano for a while, is because it had those fine, flowy branches.
Yeah. And I think like if you took that same concept and built angled rock work the way that you would in a freshwater aquascape,
The
like
forced perspective.
exactly, and with those angles that you want, and you started with 2 spaghetti leathers in the front and then faded out to pulsing xenia in the back with tiny polyps.
That could be cool.
And you sort of get that like
Yeah.
tiny thing in the back, big thing in the front, and your eye is drawn all the way in. That's what I don't see people doing.
Blastomusa wellsi in the front and Blastomusa merletti in the back.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Is that like the
This could
business
be
in the
fun.
front, party in the back?
That's why
The Muller of aquariums.
these guys.
But I'd also like to see some more like avant-garde aquascapes like you get in freshwater, where you're trying to recreate a landscape or make it look like something it's not. Bare bottom with green star polyp to represent your grass might be the carpeted tank of saltwater.
See, I just love that idea because I'm always picturing like if you grew it right, you know how like if you're looking at a field of wheat and like a gust of wind goes through it,
Yeah.
you could do that, but with green star polyp.
You know, with a Nero 3.
Exactly.
Yeah, like if you've got, let's do a bonsai tank. Bare bottom, have green star polyp cover the bottom, a rosette hammer, but you trim off all the stalks from the bottom 6 inches and you let the top grow.
Almost like a tabling effect.
Yeah.
That could be very cool.
And make it look like a tree.
Yeah.
That's really weird.
No, I like it. I like it. I think we should try it.
It almost feels wrong.
Almost, but not quite.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
More people need to do stuff that might look dumb.
To try it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing that people don't think about. They look at all the aquascapes today, and they're like, "Wow, they look so good." Millions of dumb aquascapes were the trial and errors of resulting in that. And I don't mean dumb as in like bad, but like dumb as in just like they tried something and it didn't quite work.
All right, but here's the hard counterpoint to that. One of the managers from Proust Pets and I were talking about this years ago when we were doing some planted aquascaping contests between the two stores. And we said, well, let's see if we can figure out how to do this with saltwater. The reason nobody wants to try something that might be dumb is because instead of a $4 plant, you have a $60 coral.
Yeah.
Right. So that's where it starts to...
But
So
if you
here's
do
the
it small, you can start cheap and it will take less time to get where you want. Like a $20 hammer frag can become 6 inches tall within a year for sure. You know, if you are very careful about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and here's my counterpoint. Think of all the equipment that goes on top of that $4 plant. Now, the type of light that you would put on a green star polyp. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think a lot of the time people look at the individual coral and the individual plant and think one is more expensive than the other. And I'm like, it depends on what equipment you're using to keep that thing going. And I think that's from the perspective of I look at fish and stuff not as like the price tag that I'm buying when I take it home. I often think of them as how much I'm going to pay to keep this going for about 5 years.
True.
Well, and there have to be like some things that will work and we can know that for sure. We just don't yet. And there's so much there's nobody already doing it.
No, I
so
agree.
you can't look at it and be like, oh, I'll just do it like they do. You have to be like, let me throw $500 at this project and see what happens.
Exactly.
And nobody wants to do that because it's crazy.
That's the only point that I'm making there.
Yeah.
With the cost of the coral.
It
right?
does need to be said that you can't, it's not as easy to just be like, chuck it in there and see if it dies.
Right.
Because sometimes we do that with plants.
And even the competitive aquascapers out there, they're taking their tank and that tank is set up for 8 months and that's it. And then they keep all the hardscape and they keep some of the plants, but that's it. And you can't do that with a saltwater tank.
Yeah, there has to be a way, at least not to do the same thing, for it to be its own thing.
I agree. That there's got to be a saltwater version of it.
Yeah, it can't be exactly what the freshwater stuff is, but it should exist.
I think a lot of what it is just simply doing like what we've been talking about, where you're doing a coral or maybe 2 kinds of coral and a focus organism.
Maybe it's just that everybody who has a 75-gallon reef tank should have a 10-gallon experiment tank too.
There we go.
Yeah,
Now we're talking.
Then you can feed it. You can move stuff in and out. You can take your own frags. I mean, you can get started with nanos, but like, I get wanting the stability of a bigger tank and wanting to know that your investments are protected.
Right.
But take it farther and do something fun.
Yeah, and your Cyphastria that's growing like crazy in your 75-gallon tank, you don't want to put the whole colony in your little 10-gallon experiment tank, but break a little piece off and throw it in the 10 for a while and let it grow on something weird to get a weird shape.
Yeah.
This is a mentality that I had never considered myself, but it's not different than the people who keep a community freshwater tank in a 5-gallon to occasionally spawn their cherry barbs or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, true.
It's this... It's the same idea, just with coral.
I think we're onto something. I think we should put... Here's how we do this. So here's how we try it. Right? We've got our 220 display. Let's set up a 10-gallon nano right next to it and for the experiment, we'll do it for like a 6 months experiment, and we're only allowed to pull stuff out of the 220.
Oh, that would be fun. It might be the solution to your, if you want to grow like more demanding coral, you probably need water that's already dosed.
Yeah, that's true.
Do your water changes out of your display.
Damn it, Amy, you're making a lot of sense.
That sounds fun.
That does sound really, and like, yeah, it would be pretty easy. And honestly, if you're trimming your corals in the display, not all of those corals are going to make it to frag plugs and make it to the fish store or to somebody else anyway. So
Right.
throw your chips and stuff in something else.
So, Amy, I'm a little surprised about something.
What's that?
There's a tank that I cannot believe has not been mentioned yet. A certain creature.
Oh, I didn't go there this time.
Really?
I thought about it, but it's better done in a larger tank.
What size?
Depends on the species.
Yeah.
There are some that stay like 3 inches that you could do in a 10-gallon tank.
As long as it's acrylic.
Yeah, as long as, well, if they're small, they are not going to break glass.
Okay.
Like, if they're not a 6-inch mantis shrimp, they're going to not break glass.
Yeah.
By the way, I want you guys to know that's the first time you mentioned the actual thing.
So I'm currently in the process of setting up a mantis shrimp tank. And yes, they are excellent nano residents, or they can be. If you get one of the species that are less than 3 inches, 10-gallon is perfectly fine. They're going to hang out in the rockwork most of the time. Got to be careful of those species because a lot of them are nocturnal or shut up their burrows at night or shut up their burrows during the day or never come out or whatever. But if you get the right one, it will be out there to see you every day. If you do the one that I did, which was Neogonadactylus wenerae, one of the smaller ones, then it would be just fine in a 10.
Was he active? Like, did he greet you? And
he didn't move out of his burrow ever. They're pretty much be in the entrance of the burrow at all times.
ambush predator?
Yeah, for the most part.
Okay.
Some of them never leave their burrows. And some of them are actually not colorful at all, but that one is it's kind of like the mini peacock mantis shrimp, which is the one that everybody wants, but they get 8 inches and they can break glass. So if you choose the right mantis shrimp, if you find it, then it is a fantastic nano tank.
Okay.
Very personable, very always trying to observe you, very colorful, awesome things. The other thing we didn't talk about is shrimp goby pairs. Pistol shrimp and a watchman goby.
Well, that was the one on my list too. You know, when we're talking about shrimp and crustaceans, because technically a mantis shrimp is not a shrimp.
It's not a shrimp. It's a stomatopod.
Yes.
Which is a type of crustacean.
But yeah,
Listen.
one of my all-time favorite saltwater fish is the antenna goby. I love those little guys. An antenna goby with a tiger pistol or a Yashahaza goby with a candy pistol. I think it's just a really cool combination. It would be great in a 10-gallon tank.
Gorgeous.
Yep.
Yeah, I almost didn't mention them because it's ubiquitous. I mean, like, that's the one thing, the nano thing that people know,
Right.
is the shrimp goby pair. But that doesn't mean that it's overrated or anything. It just is known.
If you did a Yashahazi goby with a candy pistol shrimp and a bunch of jack-o'-lantern coral.
Ooh. That would be beautiful. It'd be crazy colors.
I know, it'd be sweet. There's my ultimate.
Everybody go set up every nano tank we talked about tonight. I want to see pictures, okay?
I know, right?
I got one. This is like off the cuff because we're just talking crustaceans. You know what's the one tank that I think a hermit crab belongs in? 2.5 gallon by itself.
Ooh, that would be fun.
Yeah, for sure.
Or one of the bigger ones in the 10, you know?
Yeah.
Hermit crabs are beautiful. They're really fun to watch.
They're amazing personalities. They're cool.
And
I
if you
just don't want them next to my snails.
Yeah, they're
if
just
you've
destructive.
ever kept a terrestrial, or what's the word for that? Not terrestrial, the in and out hermit crab.
Say amphibious.
Amphibious? Is that would okay. Anyway, if you've ever kept the one that you'd buy at like a pet store to put in a critter keeper with sand, and you've killed it because everyone who keeps one of those kills it. and they're impossible and they're so sensitive, and you got to make sure that you have like enough fresh water and enough salt water, and make sure they don't drown, and make sure they have enough stuff to climb on, and make sure you keep enough of them.
You have to make sure that you don't keep your bird cage above their little enclosure where the birdseed can fall into the enclosure, grow, and give them something to use to crawl out on.
Very important.
Hypothetically, of course.
This sounds like it's not hypothetical.
So if you've ever murdered a couple of those, as we all have, the hermit crabs that we keep in salt water are nothing like that. I mean, give them the dirtiest water ever. Don't change their water, whatever. They will probably survive. They'll be miserable, but they will survive. They're not like the ones that you've kept before that will die at the slightest anything being wrong. They are bulletproof. They're hardy. They're active. They're really cool.
Right.
I mean, we got them in on trade-ins, and I kept them in the critter keeper in the cubes downstairs for months. And they recently got upgraded to the bowl.
Yeah, that would be that's a great kid's pet. I think hermit crabs as like the kid's pet that everybody knows are a terrible kid's pet, but like you can feed a hermit crab algae and it will be happy. Keep the water moderately clean.
Moderately. They're frighteningly hardy.
They're like the saltwater amano shrimp if amano shrimp could hurt things the way they wanted to.
Wow.
I like it.
I don't know. We could go on all night.
Give me one other take. So give me like okay, now you've got to pick one more. Think of the ones that you were thinking of. I want to hear one more really cool example.
Did I use all of my examples?
You did?
I might have. Do you have another one?
Sure. Let's say you do a 10-gallon, you want it fish only, and you want a fish that's really colorful. I say throw in a damsel. Like if you want the cheap saltwater tank.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
5 pounds of live rock and a damsel.
And a AquaClear 20.
There you go.
That's the whole tank.
That's true.
With some of the species, you wouldn't even need to put a heater on it.
I didn't think of that, but yeah.
Yeah. As long as it's one of the smaller damsel species, one that stays small.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how aggressive it is. Doesn't matter. They're hardy. They're active.
I've done my Dottie back harping on previous podcasts, but the same concept just with a damsel. If you really like damsels,
yeah.
You don't even need to really like damsels. If you just want like a saltwater fish,
there you go.
I think damsels are like if they didn't not want to be in tanks with other fish, we'd put them in all sorts of tanks. Like just based on looks and like personality, other than being crazy aggressive, they're awesome.
They're fun.
Yeah.
It's like the betta of the salt.
Yeah.
Like that's like the betta tank equivalent.
Yeah. Although I think I would argue that there are a lot of the smaller goby species. I think a neon goby is almost as hardy as a damsel.
It's true.
I mean,
It's true.
They're pretty solid little fish, and they don't have that murderous personality.
But if you want a murderous fish in a 10-gallon tank.
Or like a single specimen of a lot of things, like damsels, dottybacks, clownfish, a single fish that you normally can't really keep with other fish. That's small.
Yeah.
I love our little yellow damsels.
Yeah.
They're jerks, though. They're downright bloodthirsty.
Oh, yeah. As long as they're by themselves, I love them.
They're one of the few fish. Like, I joke around a lot in the basement that it's like the fish look at me and they're like, I will destroy you.
Yeah.
That's the one fish that genuinely means it.
That genuinely wants to.
Yeah. Like, I've had fish that'll attack me, but their demeanor is very clearly, just get away from me.
Yeah.
Like that cinnamon clownfish.
Yeah.
She doesn't want to kill me. She just wants me to go away.
Right.
Those damsels want to kill me.
And they want it to hurt, too.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a good one. We didn't talk about much.
I think we kind of nailed it, guys. I think we talked about some really good options, some ways to do it cheap, some ways to go all out. We talked about a lot of different fish ideas. We talked about a lot of different crustacean ideas. I don't know that we missed any of the big groups that you could do. We didn't talk about macroalgae tanks. You could do some cool macroalgaes in 10 gallons.
Without needing to worry much about minerals. That's like the main benefit to macros over coral is they're not going to care if your calcium gets a little wonky.
Right?
How about a 10-gallon with red macroalgae and an Allen stamsel?
That would be
Allen's damsel
beautiful.
would eat the red macroalgae.
But that would be cool.
Until the algae was gone. And you'd still have a cool Allen's damsel.
That's true.
You know.
I regret nothing.
I hope we missed something because I hope somebody tells us what their saltwater nano ideas are. I would love to hear that.
What is the one you've been thinking of? Let's hear some of those ideas and send them to us, and let's talk about, come up with that crazy idea, and we'll talk about how to pull it off.
Yeah, I love to talk about how to make weird ideas work.
Yeah.
Because when they do, it's so much better.
I know, by the way, if your idea is because you want to keep a fish that's too big, we're going to say, sorry, not going to happen.
Yeah, we can't make that work.
Nope. So it's got to be stuff that really is okay in 10 gallons of water. Now let's see if we can find a way to make it work. Let's bust some of those myths about smaller tanks being too hard, or that the freshwater aquarium does way better at aquascaping. Let's try to do that with saltwater.
Yeah, prove them wrong.
We really hope to hear from you on this, and we do thank you so much for listening. In the meantime, let's keep those hands wet.